I'm here with Kori. Hey, Kori.
Hi, Jared. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm delighted as well. So, Kori started off as your typical meal planning RD, registered dietitian, working on an acute medical floor in a hospital, but she quickly realized that her clients needed more. The shift into primary care nourished her love of counseling, and Kori then later on made the move to start up an online mindful eating business during her first maternity leave, where she coaches clients and clinicians mindful eating. I love it. So, before this mindful eating business and what you do currently, you said your clients needed more. You were a registered dietitian, but your clients needed more. What did you mean by this?
Well, a few things happened before I started my online business. And when I was working in the hospital, I was working in acute care, as you mentioned. So I would literally get a referral. I would walk in. I would basically say my 10-minute spiel with a client, patient, and then I would leave and maybe not see them ever again. I also worked in respirology, so often clients with COPD, so with breathing issues, they would come back to the hospital. So sometimes I would actually get to see clients again, but the hope was that we would help them heal and they would go on and live healthy lives. So once I worked in the hospital, I realized, when people are hooked up to machines and, not feeling well, it's not the best time to approach someone about making lifestyle changes. And so after, maybe one referral and one experience, I just remember thinking, gosh, there's got to be more outside my role. Now, mind you, dietitians do lots of other things in the hospital. But, calculating tube feedings and TPN was never my thing. I'm not a math person, which is interesting because now I'm doing stats. But I just realized I really loved the talking component of our job. Which some of my colleagues at the time that worked in ICU said they actually did not like talking, which is probably why they preferred to work in ICU. And already you probably can tell I love talking. So
No, you're
I
great.
realized that I love that human component. I love getting to know people, having a conversation. And when you have 10 referrals within a day all over the hospital, you feel like you're just rushed.
Yeah.
So I didn't like that. I didn't like that feeling. And definitely, that was the feedback from patients, was they felt like they didn't get enough time. And I really liked the counseling aspect that we learned about in school. So my first job, I felt like I didn't get much exposure. So I just realized that, I really love that component of talking with clients. So the synchronicity of life, I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And I met a dietitian who told me about primary care and working in the community with clients and patients. So I ended up leaving my hospital job, which was scary because it's also at the time was considered like the golden standard for dietitians. If you work in hospital, at least in Canada, you get full everything, pension, benefits. It's kind of like the top of the pay. And so everyone looked at me like, are you sure you know what you're doing? But quality of life for me, I was not in a job that was nourishing me. So I trusted my instincts, and I ended up loving working in the community because it was a place that I could really learn how to nurture my counseling skills and to be able to ask more questions and listen more instead of delivering information. So that's what I mean by I realized my clients needed more, is I wasn't able to provide that in my previous job.
Yeah, I feel that connection, that warmth, but also putting on your curious beginner's mind and learning
Oh yeah, that beginner's mind is with me every second of the day.
Yeah, right. This whole thing this podcast just opening my eyes to so many different things, listening to people. And I love it. Yeah. You wrote an interesting phrase on your website that you really take a lot of pride, or you really feel good that this mindful eating is really great because you're really helping and no longer causing unintended harm. And I think this kind of leads into a larger topic, but let's just start one step at a time. What did you mean no longer causing unintended harm? I think that's important.
Yeah. So first, I want to start this conversation with the fact that I am not a judgmental person. There were times I did things in my life that now, I mean, hindsight, right, is 2020, that I recognize may not have been the best way to approach things. So I'm not here to say I'm right and anyone's wrong. I don't believe in those binary approaches to nutrition or life in general. So what I meant by that was more for me when I was working with clients. I can tell you of one example early in my career in that counseling role. At the time, I was very weight focused with clients. And she had said to me, she was very upset that I didn't recognize the elephant in the room because she had gone to a party and she couldn't eat or drink anything at the party because she had labeled it outside of her parameters of what was healthy. And that wasn't even part of our goal setting. So for me, those unintended consequences started to become not dealing with people's body dysmorphia or their disordered eating patterns, or even screening for eating disorders. There was a lot of things that as a dietitian I felt were out of my competencies, outside of my scope of practice. And it really just started this quest of, I need to learn more. So like the beginner's mind, I mean, never leaves me, because I'm always, how can I do this better? How can I ask more questions? What can I learn? I'm so curious to do that without suffocating myself at the same time, because there is so much to learn. I do put safe boundaries for myself to know that there's only so much I can accomplish in a day, which I've had to learn and still learn. But yeah, I just really think that we as dietitians especially need to think about the bias, the stigma, the discrimination of the folks that we're working with. And, you know, I graduated in 2007, and there's been a lot that has come out since then. There was a lot that wasn't in my curriculum that I've had to self-educate. And the best educators are those with lived experience. So there's a lot about oppression and marginalization, and with Indigenous populations that I feel completely oblivious to. And so it's become my commitment to life to make sure that I am fully aware of those things as we learn more, so that I can decrease the likelihood of unintended consequences. We may never be able to eliminate, but I'm aware that I have my own bias that I need to make explicit.
Yeah. So many different topics here.
Yes, sorry.
I do say what's coming to mind for me is getting exposed and joining the personal training industry for a while. And I think there's unintended consequences there. It's positive, well-intentioned people, for the most part, who probably are causing unintended consequences, who are. So I really appreciate that you're coming from a place where you're not saying people are wrong, but that you're just speaking from your experience, and having that collaborative energy.
Yeah, because it will distance us, right? I mean, I have made that mistake. Yeah, and I've done it recently where, I'll correct someone. And then again, from that beginner's mind of when I was there, when I said things like that and someone corrected me, it's kind of that premise you hear people say, calling in versus calling out. A lot of the work that I do tries to reduce guilt and shame. So I try to act from that. If I were this person, how would I want to be responded to? So I really try to come at it from that.
Yeah. You've learned so much coming from this angle, being aware of obesity discrimination, under or marginalized, and you got so many resources on your website, which I definitely want to dive into. So just really curious about your journey. So you shift into primary care. When did you start your online eating business, and what was that learning? You mentioned beginner's mind and learning, and you got all these topics on your website. What was that learning journey like, and when did you start your online business? Tell us more.
Oh, okay. That's a lot of years, so I'll try not to talk forever. Okay, I moved into primary care, and I had dabbled in kind of entrepreneur roles. I kind of say that it's like my third business now. First business, while I was working full time, I had a consulting business on the side, which I never promoted. I just kind of went to public speaking events just to officially have a business card. Then I developed a mindful eating app, which was interesting. Talk about learning experience. And it was published on Apple products, but I ended up taking it down because I didn't realize the amount of work that it needs to keep those things going. And it's very expensive to run apps if you don't have the income coming in. So unfortunately, I had to take that app down, but there's still things on the side that are working. So stay tuned. There might be something that gets reincarnated from that experience. But my online business really started, from probably the time I was born, because I always have had this mindset, which, when you're growing up, you get labeled different, unique, weird, whatever. I always just was in a totally different state of people in my age bracket or in my grade. And I had a really hard time fitting in, likely because I like to follow the rules and I would call people out. And I say rules just meaning I like to be nice to people, which is interesting because in dietetics, that's often what happens. The people who just want to do good for the world, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't like when other people hurt others' feelings and stuff like that. So my online business kind of really grew. Looking back from this place of I want to do more for people and be available, and I was frustrated by having rules. Oddly enough, the frustration came from having too many rules in the current workplace I was at, that I could only see people so many times and I could only do this with them. And, they would hear one message with me and then something different from another colleague in our team. And so that eventually just wore on me. And so on my, in Canada, maternity leave here is now 18 months, but at the time for me, it was only 12 months. I worked on this business, basically putting together a program that other people could duplicate in their own workplace or one-on-one with clients. And it mostly started with just educating other dietitians, social work, nurses. So actually a few different professions have actually taken my courses online on just how to really embrace that mindful eating and that weight inclusive approach in their own practice. And I would work on it at 2:00 in the morning. I would work on it while I was nursing my kids. And, talk about joy when you are in a career that really does nurture you, that beginner's mind of, learning how to navigate this online world and how to build a course online and how to code on a website and all those things that you have to learn, how to get clients, how to write copy. I mean, I had to learn all of that. I didn't have anybody showing me that. And I had no budget because I was on mat leave. So,
hello.
Yeah, you really learn how to get very creative. And you ask a lot of questions. So it was a lot of work, but looking back, I had to do it. I had to do it. I had no other choice other than live in a workplace that really was soul sucking me.
You just the nail on the coffin or whatever. For me personally, I just feel a lot of similarities from the personal training, but just always being a little different.
Yes.
Like I freaking lived in a Zen monastery for a year. Like no one does that. I don't know, a little different. I played chess by myself a lot. And the other parts you were saying about finding work that is meaningful and wanting to work with someone to completion, like really teaching them the holistic aspect of this. That coming from that place of mutual joy and connection. I really resonate with that.
Yeah. I mean, I did my yoga teacher training last year and really did it not so much to teach yoga, but just from the Buddhism side of things and understanding the philosophy of yoga and how to, like you said, I've been in the fitness world, but not trained as a fitness professional, just from nutrition guidelines, and really wanted to know that side of joy versus happiness. What does it actually mean to have joyful work or joyful movement or joyful eating?
Yeah.
I'm saying I spent a year on that, but that was part of my yoga journey, was how to really use that practice to help guide me along that part of that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have so many resources on your website. Highly suggest people going there. What's your website domain? Can you just spell it out for people? I know your Twitter is Corn Nutrition, right?
Yep. Yeah. So Core Nutrition. My Instagram is Mindful Eating with Kori K. And my website is mindfuleatingwithkori.com. So any of those you can check out.
Kori with a K. Kori with a K.
Yeah. So Kori. You want to make sure you spell it.
And so Kori, you got a ton of resources on your website. There's two in particular that I thought we could kind of focus in on today regarding one presentation. So these are talks you give or presentations you've put together, I believe. So one was Health at Every Size, a non-weight based approach to a healthier lifestyle. And the other one was When Your Client Says, but I need to lose weight. So I thought it'd be best to start with the Health at Every Size, pretend I've never heard of it. I'd love to hear your take on it. What is Health at Every Size, this non-weight based approach to a healthier lifestyle?
So the Association for Size Diversity in Health is a nonprofit association that people from all over the world are members of, and all disciplines, non-disciplines. And it's an association that just houses a registered trademark on Health at Every Size only as an act of protection from the diet industry co-opting it, which they like to do. And basically the Health at Every Size principles really just, it's not against weight loss, it's against that pursuit of weight loss. And so trying to come at it from a weight inclusive perspective in terms of health, a social justice lens, which I think is something that we don't really know how to practically roll out in our everyday work. Thinking about, we talked about marginalized, oppressed voices and how to ensure our messages, our words that we use with our clients, the words we have on our website, on our Instagram, like we talked about, those unintended consequences or harms. How can we just come at our messages from a place that really supports a holistic well-being, and let that be something individually designed, individually guided. So it's not this, population-based, this is the way for everyone.
You said weight inclusive. What do you mean by that?
So weight inclusive, there's a lot of misconceptions about that. So it's great that you can even ask that and to clarify. But basically, weight inclusive really just means that instead of approaching health based on body mass index, so the BMI of these categories are healthy and these categories are unhealthy. So that could swing to a BMI of 18.5 and less are unhealthy, to a BMI of 27 and higher are unhealthy, and all in between are considered normal. We know there's a lot of misconceptions around BMI in terms of from the fitness industry. It only looks at mass, so it doesn't look at what that mass is. It doesn't look at the fact that the BMI was developed by a white male population. Yes, there has been some changes around the body mass index to diversify it, but it was actually designed as a population tool. So from a researcher, that means it helps us to stratify population. But what's happening in places like in wellness, so fitness, nutrition, is it's being used as a goal weight.
Yeah.
So a weight inclusive approach is kind of like, if you have someone who's of higher weight going in to see a doctor and they say, they're coming into the doctor for a flu shot, and the doctor says, hey, your BMI is 35. You should see our dietitian and lose weight. When it has nothing to do with the fact that the patient came in for a flu shot. We could call that weight stigma and weight discrimination. So weight inclusive care is a patient being able to go into the office and just being treated for whatever's going on, removing weight, putting weight aside and saying, okay, if I need knee surgery, what can I do in the meantime to strengthen the muscles around my knee? Instead of a doctor saying, you need to lose X amount of pounds.
Yeah.
The same is true for someone who's in a smaller body, going into the doctor and not getting the same sort of test that someone of a larger body might get. So they're kind of classifying health based on someone's appearance and size. Weight inclusive care is kind of putting that weight aside and just treating the well-being of the client or patient that they're dealing with.
Yeah. You mentioned in the first few words describing health at every size, it's not against weight loss. I kind of forget the phrasing, but it was something about the pursuit. It's not against weight loss. It's against
the
pursuit of weight loss. Like, I feel like that's it in a nutshell. A lot of people have described health at every size as discovering like the journey, like going on a journey that's worthwhile going on, as opposed to a miserable pursuit of weight loss. How can people go on this health at every size journey? What are some ways they can start to bring it to life? Like if someone, do they sleep in longer? Do they eat differently? How do they think differently? Like before and after? Just maybe a story. Do you have any examples, just one or two or whatever, about how to bring to life health at every size in a tangible way?
Absolutely. I mean, firstly, I can say there's lots of books out there that are really great introduction. So if this is, like you said, something you've never heard about, that would be the first place to go, because it's hard to say what your listeners would really grab onto in terms of there's so much that falls into it. It affects the way you manage money. It affects the way you sleep. It affects, every decision you make. It's amazing how much this kind of paradigm can really influence one's life. But to give you a really good example of how one in the beginner stages might look at this is even just their hunger fullness cues. So this is often something that is used in a health at every size. It's kind of like the framework. You may see things like intuitive eating, mindful eating fall within those frameworks as more like roadmaps. They're not necessarily rules. Again, these things can be co-opted by the diet industry that says, hey, if you eat mindfully, intuitively, you're going to lose weight. A way that someone practices from a weight inclusive approach is that it's true you may or may not lose weight. Some people may gain if they're weight is not where the body wants to be at that time. And that's a range. It's not a magical number that anyone can come up with. But using your own hunger fullness cue is such a way to build awareness with your body. So from a yoga principle, very much that awareness of just being with one's body and being curious. Now, it's true that especially with previous dieting, someone may not be in tune with their hunger fullness. There may be metabolic issues that can contribute to being disconnected from that hunger fullness. There may be medications that throw that off. So this may not work for everyone, but one way we can build mindfulness is paying attention to when we're coming to eat or making decisions around eating. Are we hungry? How hungry are we feeling? What are we hungry for? What are we not hungry for? What's available to us? And while we're eating, can we do things that help us to honor how we want to finish eating? So do we want to feel full? Do we want to feel content? That it very much is limited on what's available to us, what's around to us. If we have distractions going on emotionally, mentally, physically, environmentally. So you can see how this can get really deep in terms of doing some work, and why having someone who's experienced with this approach to help guide you can be really beneficial. So that when you're just dealing with hunger fullness, there's so many elements. But I think of it as, I eat in lots of different places, lots of different times of the day. But I know I feel best if most times I'm eating when I'm feeling like I need some nourishment, which for me is a growl in my stomach. Sometimes that's like a sign it's too late because it can get really loud. And then when I finish a meal, it's not based on how much is on my plate. It's based on when I feel like, that hunger is faded. I'm feeling like I have enough energy to get me for a few more hours until my next meal time. And then I don't feel like a slump if, I've gone past that place that makes me feel comfortable. And that took a lot of practice to get to that. It wasn't
Interesting.
One podcast and I nailed it. It took some time to figure out what foods had different effects on my own body personally.
Yeah. So this was something that you had to kind of learn yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, never had I been formally diagnosed with any kind of eating disorder, disordered eating. But once I became more aware, there's definitely times in my younger years where I look at things that I did, things that I said that were more disordered. And so absolutely, when I, had a love-hate relationship with fitness for, I don't even know how many years, too many years. And even my eating was very erratic and went from binging to restricting. And here I was thinking it was healthy because this is what I learned at school, but how I internalized it was not healthy for me. So that's important for us to recognize, is that, like you said, here we are coming at it with good intentions, but how someone internalizes our messages is what we don't have control over. So can we do our best work to be sensitive to that? And so what I had been taught from nutrition took me on this kind of roller coaster, one that I was probably already at risk of from younger years of, going through puberty and being a woman and growing up in our culture that we have. I did have to learn, and I'm still learning, because there are still things, as we age, I became a mom. I had 2 pregnancies. Bodies change. So there's definitely things. Now I'm in a student role again that I'm relearning, like different schedules, different priorities. So I think of it as, our life journey. There's always things that I'm learning and changing and being flexible. And when you come at it from that sort of mindful, intuitive way, you're more aware to be flexible, and you're more able to stay curious, so that as life changes, or you go on vacation, or you get a new job, you lose a job, illness, you are able to respond to those things without it becoming chaos, or you know where to go and get help when you need to, and you're just more aware of those changes, so you can sort of use those changes to make that reflect in your well-being.
I love it. So thanks for sharing about your journey. Yeah, it's interesting getting into this stuff, how it permeates us, because it really changes your life, changes mine. And it brings just, a lot of, just so many good things. I think that's why you're so passionate about it. I love just seeing the passion on it. I love it. When your client says, but I need to lose weight, this is something I'm curious about, like personally. I hear this. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on this? You did write some different categories that we can talk about, but just big level topic. What's the overall gist of what do you say when your client says, but I need to lose weight?
This is such an important conversation. I get asked this all the time. I just got asked this a couple days ago. I think, there is that link to ASDA's website that you mentioned earlier. There's a webinar that folks can watch where there's a few of us talking about this from our different perspectives. And that was recorded a few years ago, but I think the points still remain very true in that webinar is, patient-centered care is being highlighted in sort of our medical world, as well as in dietetics, is, if you have a bias to your approach, so whether it's something that's weight focused or weight inclusive, I think of it as paradigm hopping. So when I first graduated, I would classify myself as a weight-centric dietitian. I was very weight focused. And I don't mean that in a negative way. That's just kind of how I operated. The old food guide in Canada was very numbers focused, portion sizes, portion control. And so that's just kind of how I operated. Then I shifted over into sort of that health at every size paradigm, where I was doing more mindful eating and intuitive eating. But I was projecting that onto people. So when people would come into my office and they'd say, I want to lose this amount of weight, or can I weigh myself on your scale? At first I was like, no, I don't do that. That's not good for you. I can't do that, because I hadn't learned how to translate that message from a patient-centered care way of doing that. So if anyone's feeling like they're doing that and wondering, how do I do this? Trust me, I've done that. So if I can save you, time on that. It's
comes up for me. I get triggered, like
totally normal.
And I can feel myself getting triggered, and I don't want to, and I'm curious. Yeah. Like I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I deal with this with family members, right? Every gathering you go to, it's like, okay, what's the new fad?
Yeah.
I won't name them. But I think motivational interviewing training is super helpful. I think so a few things, I'm always taking new trainings, for sort of learning how to do that. And, I actually run workshops through a community-based network here that keeps me always in that beginner's mind, because I'm always facilitating these workshops, and they're beginner level workshops for motivational interviewing. So I think, that immersion, right? So if you're, and having someone that you can practice, and I had a colleague for 8 years, I would go across the hallway into his office and go, okay, this just happened. Let's role play. How can I do better with this next time? Or what could I have done differently? And he happened to be a social worker. So that was instrumental for me, because that obviously, and he was at the end of his career. So he had 40 years of experience. So I think that practice and role playing and that counseling type, especially in motivational interviewing, because it's very much that stages of change. Like you said, meeting the patient where they're at, client-centered care, patient-centered care. And I kind of do a little bit of reverse psychology, for lack of a better word, in trying to get the client to tell me, this is what I've done in the past. This is what's worked. This is what's not worked. This is what I think would be ideal for me. This is what's missing. I use a lot of those open-ended questions, reflective listening, lots of empathy, which keeps my judgment and my bias way down as much as possible. And I really think, for me personally, that has helped me to be able to do that. So if you can do some trainings, if you can use more of those open-ended questions, and then you mix that in with like action planning. So once you hear that change talk, so if you know what change talk is, when clients say, I want to, I'm thinking about, I'd like to, that's when I kind of get into, okay, there's my clue for, they want to talk about hungerfulness. They're interested in learning more about regular meals. Maybe it's fitness. Then I'll use that as a way of like, okay, let's talk about, what are some ways you can do that? And it's very strategic ways on how you can do that. And weight, it's kind of like it just gets de-emphasized over time. So if a client wants to weigh themselves, we have a conversation about it. We talk about, okay, you knowing that number on the scale, tell me about that. What does that mean to you? What's going to happen if you step on the scale and the number goes up, stays the same, goes down? Tell me about that. Would you be willing to do that at the end of our session instead of the beginning of the session? So if you can see, like, the way I'm saying it is there's no judgment. It's just really, each time I get them to see me, it's de-emphasizing it. And having those learning opportunities with curiosity and asking permission, which is a technique, a skill from motivational interviewing. So that's why I highly recommend doing that training, because it will help you to, instead of paradigm hopping and projecting your bias, it will help you to have a conversation with a client.
Interesting.
Meet them where they're at. And then each time as you build rapport, they're more likely to come back. You'll have a chance to help them embody more of a practice that will be well-being inclusive from those frameworks.
I love your answer. I do.
Thank you.
Yeah. The heart of it, the energy of it. I see that. I feel it. And I'm familiar with motivational interviewing, although right there, those a couple things just make, like, thinking about how I can ask permission, those curious, open-ended questions, and really letting the client take the lead and listening for those key phrases. I'm touched. I want to imbibe that and embody that myself. I know in the stages of change, the trans-theoretical model, Nebraska, or I forget his name. Prochaska.
I only know that because I see the slide like every other week. So.
Yeah. I think I was really into, like, motivational interviewing and this whole stage change model. And because in this model, there's people that are not quite ready to take action. They're hesitant. They're maybe even not ready to even think about. They're just blocked. They're in maybe denial, or
but maybe there's some people are there. Most people are in the pre-contemplative or contemplative stage, but where clinicians treat people is in action.
Yeah.
So already we're not being effective.
Yeah. And so when you see a client and they're in the contemplative stage, they're kind of weighing the pros and cons, they're uncertain. I hear the motivational interviewing is incredibly useful. I believe one strategy is to educate a person and say, hey, here's, here are the pros and cons. Here's what we know. What is, like, yeah, how can you teach this? How can you educate? There's some questions that I have about like, how do you demonstrate a weight neutral approach is beneficial? Like education about dieting, education about, yeah, what would you teach someone if you wanted to kind of open their mind up a little bit, assuming that they're in a receptive state, that you've empathized with them and
Right.
built that connection and there's some rapport going on?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, it's important to remember that people can be at different stages of change for different things you're talking about. So often when a client comes to see you, they're coming to see you for like 100 different things, maybe even a million, right? Like they want you to just do an overhaul with them on everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's important to like just remember that. So for them coming in, you could assume they're in action, you could assume they're in contemplative, but as you start getting into things, you may notice their alcohol, okay, they're in this stage, their fitness, they're in this stage, their fruit and vegetable, water, right? So there's all these different things that you could think about. But what I try to do is first get their agenda. So we'll literally do a brainstorm. Basically, when they first come in, I'll say, "What brings you here today?" And sometimes you get like sarcastic answers that really show you where the stigma that they've experienced has been. And I say sarcastic because usually it's the client laughing, saying this, but usually that's like a first giveaway for me of where they have some internalized stigma going on. If they say things like, "Well, isn't it obvious?" Or, "Well, my doctor says this, and this is why I'm here. My husband says this." So you'll already get a clue, but that's my bias going now. So what I'll do is if they have kind of something that's outcome focused, so often I'll talk to clients about the difference between a goal and an outcome. So for example, weight is an outcome. It's not a goal, but how many clients set a goal of losing X amount of weight? So if they say something like, "I want to lose 20 pounds before my knee surgery," we'll follow up with, "Okay, it sounds like losing 20 pounds before knee surgery is important to you. Can you tell me what that might look like for you? What have you tried in the past? What actions do you think need to happen to change for that to happen?" So what I'm now trying to do is figure out what's going on in their life, right? Get their story. That's what motivational interviewing really is getting the client's story and listening each time, having a chance to reflect on those answers, that story they give. So that helps to build that rapport, that empathy, and they'll tell me more when I do that. I'll get more juicy, and they'll say, you'll hear clients say things like, "I've never even told my doctor about this." How often I've heard that, because they can tell that I am really into what they're going to tell me. And you're creating a safe place for them to share. And so they might say things like, "Well, I need to be more active," or "I eat a lot of fast food," or I don't eat very regularly. And so they might spit out, 10 things, and I write them all out on a piece of paper, or I'll get the client to do it. We'll talk about, would you feel able to write on this piece of paper? Would you like me to help? We'll have conversations about that because of ability, language. There's other things that we want to be aware of when we're using worksheets. Sometimes I'll have a whiteboard and we'll do it on a whiteboard. Just really depends on kind of the environment that I'm working in. And then we'll pick, okay, looks like there's about 10 things, maybe there's 100. Just in looking at it, can you tell me one that really is standing out for you right now that you're interested in, or that really, seems like the best place to start? And then that's where we can start getting some actions. So maybe they pick walking. Maybe that's something they said. If you think about walking, that in itself has a lot of steps to it. So, going back to our SMART goal setting, I'm sure you've done this, with making it specific, measurable, action, realistic, time frame. The acronym can stand for different things depending on how you were trained in it. And I don't say SMART goal setting to clients because they don't understand. And I don't really want to explain to them what I'm doing at this point. I want to keep the focus on, them learning about, have you set walking goals in the past? Tell me about that. What was your experience like? What did you like? What did you not like? Find out how long they did it for. And then we go through, okay, so it sounds like walking is important to you right now. Tell me about how long. What do you think is a good place to start? Where would you go for a walk? Who would you go with? What could you do to make it more enjoyable? How would you know that you, at the end of the week, the end of the month, tell me what would be a good time for you to check in with yourself. So if you can see, I'm taking that SMART goal and I'm just making it more of a conversation.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's how you can get, whether it's you have 5 minutes with a client, 60 minutes with a client, there's actual strategies for motivational interviewing that get you to be really efficient and get right into that. Because I think time is always something I hear. I don't have enough time with my clients. We know that brief action planning research, that people can do this in 2 minutes. If you get to a place where you feel really comfortable with it, it takes 2 minutes to do what I just went through. So if you don't have 2 minutes, then okay, fine, you don't have time. But if you have more than 2 minutes, you actually can do this very effectively. And it's not to say that clients will change. It's that we're giving them the steps to be more likely to be able to maintain this change.
Absolutely.
So we're helping them to move through those stages of change. And I think we forget that moving through that stage of change is success.
Yeah.
For the client.
Yeah. If you're going through this whole process and they have some, juice or motivation for food, and I'm sure, there's a lot of misconceptions about food, just ideas that are in our heads stewing around in there. And maybe someone says, I don't know, like, you know what, I've heard about intermittent fasting. I want to restrict or something like that. Or, I want to do all fat diet. I heard about that, so you write about common nutrition counseling blunders that can result in disengagement. And this is, you also write, when a client expresses a desire for weight loss. What are some common nutritional blunders?
Ooh, depends on the week, right? What's out there. I guess the category would be fad diets, any type of restriction. And
you say it leads to disengagement. I was curious what you meant by that, like a nutritional blunder that leads to client disengagement, maybe where they are restricting and then they fail at it because you can only restrict for so long. Is that a nutritional blunder that leads to disengagement, or are you talking about something else?
Yeah, it can be interpreted in different ways for sure. I think what spoke to me when you said it back to me is that the disengagement can come from when we have our judgment going. So if they come saying they want a keto, learn more about keto, or if they want to intermittent fast, those are very popular at the time of this recording anyway. And so this happened to me last week. A colleague of mine who knows what I do and was talking to me about fasting, and I could just feel myself, okay, breathe. Just stay like awareness, right? Mindfulness, just stay where you are, stay with the client, stay with the conversation. Don't go into like research mode or, past experience. Even if you know this person, I just stay the course. So I take a deep breath and I get myself grounded. That is, what I've learned from yoga is I literally dig my toes into the ground and just center myself. If I can do mountain pose, I'll do mountain pose if I'm standing. And people might notice this when I do public speaking. They'll see me do this because it just helps me. And people do that with hold things in their hands when they're speaking. So I get grounded and then I go through what I do every time. I ask
Yeah.
questions.
Uh,
Tell me what you know about keto. Tell me what you know about intermittent fasting.
I hear you.
If they know nothing, I'll say, would it be okay if I share some things about it? And what I'm learning to do as I went back to school to do my master's is to present the facts. And you hear this in law, right? You hear this with police when they do their reports, or lawyers. It's like, just state the facts. So I'm learning to, have conversations with people where I provide the facts. And so for intermittent fasting, it may be the pros and cons. And just, we want clients and patients to make their own decisions. And in order to do that, they need to be informed. And informed isn't for or against. Informed means that they have enough information to make a decision for themselves. So that's how I do it, is I ask permission, I give some information, I get what they already know about it first, so that I'm not providing information they already have. And then I'll say, tell me what your thoughts are.
Gotcha.
And that's how I do it.
Gotcha.
And it just keeps me from jumping into my own bias.
Yeah. I hear you. I really admire the empathy that is like oozing out right here and radiating out. Like, if you can imagine, I'm getting this image of you, just the curiosity, like the focus on the other person. That's rare. And the passion behind that genuineness. I can feel that spirit. And I think that's one thing that you're expressing and that I'm picking up on, like the heart of talking to a client, talking that energy exchange. So honored to absorb that as best I could. And kind of wrapping up, I know you told we have it on record, your website and all that stuff, and links will be down below. But who do you want to work with, and what services do you provide? And if there's any other way, or if there's any other projects you got coming up, a book or I don't know, something like that, where can people find more about you and stuff like that?
Yeah. So most of the work I'm really doing right now are workshops. I'll be at the Dietitians of Canada conference in June, which will be in Saskatoon. And I'll be presenting with Julie Sweeney, who's a counselor, on weight stigma in dietetics and how we can sort of be aware and conscious of that and things we can do. So that's exciting. And then I'll also be speaking on stage with Dr. Arya Sharma, Lindsay Mazer, and Jennifer Brown, who just were authors of the Weight Stigma Backgrounder, which is being used in Dietitians of Canada membership. And as well, the clinical practice guidelines for, and I'm going to say obesity in quotations, for those who cannot see me doing quotations. And so I'll have a chance to comment on that. So those are things that I'm really doing more advocacy work at the moment. So I'm not doing as much counseling one-on-one with clients at the moment, and doing my master's. So the book is there. It's just kind of percolating at the moment until I finish my thesis. But yeah, so I'm doing a lot of online webinars. So my website is getting overhauled. So if you can keep in touch on Instagram and my website, those are the best places. I'm not really doing much else for right now on social media. Those would be the best places to keep up to date. But I have a course on blending motivational interviewing with mindful eating if people want to get in touch about that, or the basics of sort of mindful eating in your own practice. I have a course on that, and we can stay in touch in those outlets.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was great chatting and getting to know you as well.